Just having a little look here at, I'm working on a submission to the Human Rights Commission in Australia, the Sex Commissioner there, and yes, about the genital mutilation of boys in Australia. And these are my notes. I was born in Brisbane in 1954. I was delivered, blah blah blah, and also genitally mutilated without anesthetic. That's as far as I know. That's what my mother told me anyway. Without anesthetic by the same doctor who delivered me. I lost my genital integrity there at that place. I won't mention the name of the hospital or the doctor. That's all for my submission. My mother and father were not genitally mutilated, yes. My father wasn't genitally mutilated. My mother wasn't genitally mutilated. Her father wasn't genitally mutilated. Her brothers weren't genitally mutilated. And, yes, both my elder and younger brothers were also genitally mutilated, but at other times and at other hospitals. I do not speak on their behalf. I was a perfectly healthy baby boy born genitally intact and had no need of genital mutilation, which was at that time referred to as circumcision. What a joke. Circumcision. I was not able to give any informed consent. I wasn't, or otherwise. I wasn't able to say I wanted to be mutilated or I didn't want to be mutilated, was I? As it turns out, I didn't want to be mutilated. I was not able to give any informed consent or otherwise in regards to my genital mutilation because, as you can imagine, I was only a baby. It was my mother who decided to have me genitally mutilated. So here you have a bit of, we're used to hearing, oh, what a terrible thing female genital mutilation is and blah, 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 and how it's oppressive of women. Here you have a woman deciding to genitally mutilate me. It was my mother who decided to have me genitally mutilated. I had my foreskin, the most sensitive organ of the male body, with the most nerve endings, amputated. I call it an amputation or a mutilation. My circumcision, I should have said the amputation, mutilation, yes. An unwanted circumcision. Yes, my circumcision was an unwanted circumcision. It is and was a genital mutilation performed against my will upon my person and without my informed consent. Informed consent is necessary, isn't it? What people do over the age of 18 with their bodies, they can mutilate them to bilio, they can pierce them, they can scarify them, they can do whatever once they're an adult who can decide. Yes, it was done without my informed consent. It is and was a human rights violation. To the extent that girls in Australia are protected by federal law, now they've been protected for about the last 15 years. If you draw a pinprick of blood from a girl's clitoris, or her clitoral hood, or wherever you want to draw it from, a pinprick of blood, you will get 7 years in jail for that. To the extent that girls in Australia are protected by federal law, against genital mutilation, but boys are not, I consider my genital mutilation to have been a discrimination on grounds of my gender. I observe that boys are still being genitally mutilated in Australia, and that girls are not. Now, there's a couple of, what do you call it? Female genital mutilations probably done illegally, etc., but, yes, well, I'm not talking about that. They should be protected too, but, yes, what am I saying? I observe that boys are still being genitally mutilated in Australia and that girls are not. At the time, I was routinely genitally mutilated. It was not the practice to do the same to baby girls. This is discrimination, and it is discrimination, isn't it? To what's good for the goose should be good for the gander, what's good for the gander should be good for the goose. Women now are arguing, there's been argument about whether they should be fighting on the front lines. I think they're going to be allowed to fight on the front lines. So if you can fight on the front lines, you can be mutilated or not mutilated on the front lines, just like just like men are. On the front lines of circumcision, you will be mutilated or not mutilated. The law should be made equal, shouldn't it? I have heard radio broadcast recordings on the internet of former Sex Discrimination Commissioner Prue Goward. That's P-R-U, Prue. Prue Goward being very vocal and insistent about protecting the genital integrity of baby girls, but at no point in those interviews did I once hear her defend the genital integrity of boys. Western feminists without penises tend to trivialize male circumcision, alas. Then there's role model extraordinaire Oprah Winfrey, who would be the first to defend the genital integrity of little African girls, but who is known to wear an expensive beauty cream made from the harvested foreskins of little boys. So women too, they sort of, like there's an interview with Prue Goward. I'll leave the link below, and there's a newspaper article too. Prue Goward says there's only one law in Australia. She's telling people from other countries who want to mutilate their little girls that there's only one law for all Australians, that is, that you don't mutilate little girls. But Prue is telling fibs, actually, because if there's only one law for little girls, it means the law would apply to boys too, but it doesn't apply to boys. There are two laws. It's a two-law system. There isn't just one law in Australia that people have to abide by. It's two laws. One law says you don't mutilate little girls. The other law says it's okay to genitally mutilate boys. Surely any laws to protect the genital integrity of female children in Australia should also apply equally to boys. I cannot see how genitally mutilating one gender and not the other can be seen as equal treatment for all. Surely we all get the chop, or we all don't get the chop. I believe that boys should be protected as well as girls. I also believe that I should be compensated for having been subject to such a violent and barbaric human rights abuse as a helpless child. Furthermore, a fund should be set up by the government to compensate all males who have been genitally mutilated against their wills and or who have had later complications due to their unwanted genital mutilations. The Queensland Department of Health had no right to mutilate my body, and they didn't. If you went out on the street and just mutilated someone's body, cut off the end of their penis, you'd be put in jail as a violent sex offender, you would. Or if you mutilate a little girl in the same way, you'd be put away twice, wouldn't you? Because girls' virtue can be protected, can't it? But boys' virtue doesn't matter. Boys' genital integrity doesn't matter, does it? The Queensland Department of Health had no right to mutilate my body. Had I been born in any other state of Australia at that time, I would have also been genitally mutilated in the same way. Yes, had my mother decided to do it in another state, I would have been mutilated. So my complaint involves all the Australian states and territories. When I was at school, I observed that boys were caned and that girls were not. That was sex discrimination, favouring girls and disadvantaging boys. We seem to have come a little way since then. When I was at school, if a boy didn't sing God Save the Queen, he was caned. If a girl didn't sing God Save the Queen, she just had to write out a few notes or a few lines or something, Different treatment, two-tier system, Like it's okay to genitally mutilate one sex. You're not allowed to genitally mutilate the other. You can cane one sex and you can't cane the other, etc., etc. However, there can be no true gender equality if boys are being subject to genital mutilation and girls aren't. Here's a bit of comedy. Here's a bit of comedy now. As far as I am concerned, if there are no laws to protect the genital integrity of boys, then the laws protecting the genital integrity of girls should be repealed. It should be repealed. What's good for the gander is good for the goose too, surely. Either we're all equal or we aren't equal. If we aren't equal, then sex discrimination is okay, apparently. Please tell me what steps you, as Sex Discrimination Commissioner, are taking to protect the genital integrity of boys in Australia. It is clear that your commission is interested in protecting the genital integrity of girls. There's nothing that can bring back my lost genital integrity. Yes, my genital integrity has been lost. It's been taken from me. It's been robbed from me. There's nothing that can bring back my lost genital integrity, but I certainly hope you will defend the rights of all future Australian boys to keep theirs. What they do after age 18, of course, is then their own affair. About 5 years ago now, I emailed the Human Rights Commission to inquire as to the notion of male genital mutilation as a human rights violation against infant boys. I was advised in that email that any complaint defending the genital integrity of infant boys would be unlikely to succeed. I now regret being so easily deterred by the Commission's weak and discouraging response, and I wish I had taken action and written this letter years earlier. I talk a little bit about, yes. And there's a big form I filled out to get it online from the Human Rights Commission. They want to know how the human rights violation you're complaining about affects you. So I said, how does this genital mutilation, a human rights violation, affect me? Loss of sensory pleasure that my own intact foreskin would have afforded me. Now that Dr. McGrath, that expert on male genital mutilation from New Zealand, he says that 75 to 80% of my specialized sensory tissue would have been lost due to circumcision. That's how much you can lose. Up to 75 to 80% of your specialized sensory tissue can be lost. This is a loss of a lifetime. I must make the point, I haven't seen him. I'm just talking about his video, the videos of him I've seen. This is a loss of a lifetime of erotic pleasure for me. Yes, I've lost some degree of erotic pleasure. It doesn't matter if it's 1% or 99.9%, I have lost degrees of erotic pleasure due to my genital mutilation, and to other boys upon whom such genital mutilation was inflicted. This is a loss of a lifetime of erotic pleasure for me and to other boys upon whom such genital mutilation was inflicted. It was inflicted upon me. It is inflicted upon other boys. The Australian government has not defended the federal government has failed to defend boys against genital mutilation for the past 15 years since they brought in that legislation to defend little girls' genital integrity. Yes, I go on about the various effects of genital mutilation, what effects they've had on my body or my life. Yes, I make the point that I am living as an amputee unnecessarily. Genital mutilation of boys, foreskin amputation, yes, makes me an amputee. It's the foreskin is basically an organ of in and of itself. It's got 75 to 80% of my specialized sensory tissue from my genital region. It was all cut out. Where is it now? Was it put in a hospital? Was it put in a hospital? What do you call it? Incinerator or what? Or was it? No, they didn't sell them off then to make face creams for people like Oprah Winfrey to put beauty cream on her face. I think she's a dickhead. What we call in Australia a dickhead, because Oprah Winfrey's got mutilated foreskins of little boys, infant boys, helpless boys, creamed all over her face. So she's a dickhead, in my opinion. The aesthetic aspect. The beauty of my penis was destroyed. Yes, when you get your genitals mutilated, your beauty is destroyed as far as I'm concerned. That's my opinion. It would be the opinion of lots of other people too. As an infant, my health would have been unnecessarily endangered by this operation, which of course ends in death for some male babies each year. There are babies who die from this stupid operation, aren't there? So I had this big complaints form to fill out. Is there anything in here specific that I might make mention of? Who am I complaining about? The respondent is the Australian Federal Government and the Queensland Government, the Queensland Health Department. They mutilated me. Why am I complaining to the Commission? I'm complaining because I have been discriminated against because of my sex. Yes, because I'm a male. If I were a female, the federal government would have defended me. Even the Sex Discrimination would have defended me more vociferously. As I said, previous Sex Discrimination Commissioner Prue Gowd was very vocal about defending little girls. She didn't even put in one word for little boys in the interviews that I've read or listened to on internet radio. My human rights have been breached by a federal government agency, yes. I tell them what happened and why it's relevant, even if it happened in 1954. The fact is, the federal government has failed to defend little boys for the last 15 years. I think that's about it, really. Just see. Is there anything else? Plenty of pages. Plenty of pages I filled out and worked on. Further information. Yes, yes. What outcome are you? What outcome? What outcome are you seeking? I would like to see laws implemented to defend the genital integrity of boys. I also would like to see all males that were subjected to genital mutilation in the past fairly and justly compensated for their pain, suffering, loss of sexual enjoyment, and the destruction of their genital beauty. I think that's reasonable that we defend these things. I also seek an apology from the governments who committed these human rights violations. If you chop up someone's penis, if you're responsible for that, you should take responsibility for it. And that's all about, we talk about rights and responsibilities nowadays. Some conservatives wanted to call the Australian Human Rights Commission the Australian Rights and Responsibilities Commission. Well, if we're going to take responsibility, we're going to have to start defending boys as well as girls. That's my opinion. That's my opinion. Thank you for listening to me. Look in the links below for Prue Goward's comments in newspaper and ABC radio. And I'll give a link to the Human Rights Commission as well, in case you're in Australia and you want to make a complaint to defend the genital integrity of boys. See ya.